If there's one thing to be said about the Bomberman formula, it's that it gets old. That's not to say the games are bad, but there's nothing there to grip people for an extended period of time. Look at the sheer number of games Hudson managed to put out in a little over 2 decades. There's over 80 games in this list, and there was clearly demand that drove the insane output. Although the games were mainly sought after for their multiplayer, the series originated with single-player campaigns which would grow and eventually peak at Bomberman 3DS. Just kidding, that game got fucking shit-canned after Hudson Soft got bought out by Konami. People were justifiably concerned over the Konami absorption, but personally I like Konami. They made classics like WBSCE Baseball and PES 2014, so I was excited to see what they had in mind. After 7 years of no games, Bomberman was turned into what appears to be gacha shit for pedophiles. I had to give it a try, so I followed a guide by Lowly Master XP.
Okay, hello, welcome. We're going to get signed up for Bomber Girl.
Bomber Girl's not too dissimilar to classic Bomberman multiplayer, but it functions more like a MOBA now. I think more so than any of the other popular games in the genre, the appeal here is the characters, and the only method of unlocking them is through a gacha. You can get enough tickets for 1 pull a day if you play 5 matches, and the chances of winning some broad in a bikini is just 3%, which is all far too low. What any self-respecting wagey is gonna do is up their chances by spending their hard-earned cash on premium tickets for more pulls. Some people will even go as far as to spend their entire life savings on this shit. I just didn't really get it, so I had to see for myself what the hype was all about.
Oh my god!
Let's fucking go!
Wait, it's just a voice.
It's clean.
So this video is going to turn back the clock to when Hudson Soft was an independent company publishing good games. I'll start with Bomberman Generation on the GameCube. There's been an issue with the franchise where the developers split their already thin resources across 2 very different modes, typically a campaign and a multiplayer battle mode. One of the 2 always tends to suffer, and that's partly why Bomber Girl was such a successful entry. And yeah, I know, the girls have some grabbable tits, but it was finally a Bomberman game with a focused vision. In Generation's case, it's the battle mode that's a shining example of what the franchise is all about. The gameplay feels almost universal to me, but I realize a lot of people have no idea what Bomberman plays like, so let me give you the quick rundown. Each player starts in the corner of a stage where they're able to place 1 bomb at a time. By blowing up blocks, you'll find items like bomb, explosion range, and movement speed up, as well as the ability to punch, kick, and throw bombs. The most distinctive aspect of Bomberman is that you can't just walk through other bombs, so you've always got to be aware of your surroundings. The battle mode follows the tried and tested formula the series had established thus far, but the campaign's totally different. Bombs don't even explode in a cross shape, and it's filled to the brim with these stupid minigames that interrupt the gameplay constantly. Generation was a watered-down version of the N64 games, and its successor Jetters follows through with that same level of quality. It's especially obvious when you notice that Jetters was released 6 months after Generation and retailed for just $20. It's like Hudson knew they couldn't get away with this shit twice. There's a lot of people who really love Bomberman 64, but I also think those people are probably really... I personally prefer 64 The Second Attack, but both these games are the complete opposite of Generation in that they have excellent campaigns but horrible multiplayer modes. I'm going to be talking about The Second Attack's campaign in the latter half of this video, but I want to go deeper into Generation's battle mode first. I might consider this game the peak of the franchise's multiplayer, not only because of how easy it is to play online, but also because of the variety of modes included. I was really surprised to find out that Generation is the only Bomberman game with dodge battle. It's a mode where bombs fall from the sky and your only actions are to kick and punch them away.
Battle!
Sorry, I messed with the camera.
Yeah, fix it, bro.
You can't fix it after it starts.
That's so dumb, bro.
They just don't make them quite like they used to. It's kind of like how you can tilt the menu in Melee using the C stick. It's really just a net negative for everyone involved, but they put it in anyways.
This is too top down for my taste.
There's a bunch of other unique modes too, like Revenge Battle. Typically in the standard battle mode, you can actually fuck with the other players even after you die by shooting bombs from the sidelines. There's also a super option that lets you get back in the game if you manage to kill someone this way, and they decided, why not make a whole mode around this mechanic?
Hold on.
Who's doing
Hold
that?
on.
Yeah, that was all me controlling it. I quit that shitty game mode we were playing too.
But if there's one major qualm I have of Bomberman Generation, it's that suicide bombing isn't a viable strategy.
Sander, hold on.
What?
In older games, this scenario would result in a tie, but in Generation, one player always has to be the winner. When you think about it, it might actually just be a problem with the rules. The only win condition available is first to X, but I wish there was a best of option instead.
It's a tie!
What the fuck? For what it's worth, there's a decent amount of options here, like the Super Revenge I mentioned earlier, and whether you play PK Bomber after every match. The winner gets a chance at scoring an item to start the next game with, while the remaining players try and wall them out. Yeah, I'm censored. What is Blue doing?
I'm right. I thought I was right.
Follow the arrow.
I'm saying
You were right!
You gave him triple.
I switched, bro. I'm center now.
There's also a good amount of variety across the battle stages. There's only 8 of them, but they add just enough gimmicks to keep the gameplay fresh. Let me go through them quickly. So, there's the standard one, of course. I don't want to do standard.
Stop being a liberal baby and play standard.
The grass stage makes it harder to see bombs hidden in the bushes. Super Blast starts everyone off with max power-ups. Cold Warp has the warps. Pipe Dream the pipes. The NBA. Each stage even has different item pools, and if you manage to clear the single player, you get a toggle for a secondary pool in each stage, which is easiest to demonstrate in Super Blast. Even so, that doesn't cover all the available power-ups, and there is an option to set up custom item pools, even if it is a bit of a pain in the ass. You can get a combo like the remote control, which lets you detonate bombs at will rather than them exploding on a timer, and the jacket, which provides a few seconds of invulnerability that really lets you defile the other players. Now, if there's one thing that really makes or breaks a game, it's the music. The Bomberman series has historically had some great tracks, and Generation is no exception. Okay, but the standard battle music arrangement's always been good in these games, so there was no way they could fuck it up here. Oh my god! I just realized this game was the one to throw away the classic battle theme in favor of a new one that would get used by every future game in the franchise. And people didn't complain about this? 81 on Metacritic? That's very good. Well, let me take a look at some of these reviews.
This game was released in 2002 by Hudson Software, and it is based, the story mode is crap. The story is crap.
If you like Bomberman 64, or Bomberman 64 The Second Attack, you'll get a blast out of Bomberman Generations. No pun intended.
Bomberman Generation was released in 2002 on GameCube and developed by Game Arts.
No, the fuck it wasn't! The company that makes the Grandia games? This shit was made by Hudson. Well, that's what I thought until I took a look at the Wikipedia page. It says here that Game Arts really did develop Generation, and every other corner of the internet mentions how unusual it is that that's the case. Well, guess what? Game Arts isn't mentioned on the box, the splash screens, or even the fucking credits, and it's obviously not listed on their website either. Turns out on August 19, 2009, one retard was walking around Central Park in Manhattan editing a bunch of gaming-related Wikipedia pages, including changing Generation's developer from Hudson to Game Arts. This in turn caused a butterfly effect wherein everyone on Earth would end up parroting this easily identifiable mistake. Mystery solved, I guess. I thought I might just leave it at that. Maybe someone watching this video would take to fixing the page, and I would feel like I made a real, tangible change in this world. But then I was checking Find Friends on my phone as you do, and I saw my good friend Pesty was actually in Manhattan right now. I thought it would be cool if we went full circle and I got him to correctly edit the page at Central Park.
Nah, you're fucking wrong. I'm with it, bro.
What do you mean?
I walk into this shit and then you call? Come on. Never played air in a while. And I don't realize it.
Yeah, you guys haven't done anything with me in a while because you hate me and you just play Fortnite.
Yeah, you've been toxic though, bro.
Yeah, because you guys are leaving me out.
No, we're not.
I thought we were a team.
You're being a nuisance.
I was being a nuisance?
Undesirable to hang out with.
What? Why did I not expect this would happen? It happens every time. But Pesty was the one in the position of power right now, so I had no choice but to kneel to him.
I could turn around right now, damn. Like, it's not a problem.
No. After we got back on track, I guided him to the nearest public Wi-Fi, which happened to be the local Starbucks. I think he got a salted caramel mocha frappuccino there too.
Alright, check the page.
So there we go, page fixed. It took 14 years to get here, but I'm glad we finally made it. I guess the moral here is not to source all your information from Wikipedia. Yeah, I don't know, who cares? The Second Attack's campaign plays similar to Generation's battle mode. Bombs still explode in a cross shape after a short timer. You can place 2 of them at once, but this time you can take multiple hits instead of dying in one shot. The UI illustrates this with hearts to indicate your health, and even the enemies can tank hits with their HP bars. Before we get into any of this though, there's a cutscene where Bomberman and his egg are sucked into a black hole and end up on the planet Alcatraz. A couple of guards steal Bomberman's Firestone, his only means of creating bombs. It seems like we're out of options until Pommy hatches out the egg we were holding onto. He takes it upon himself to fight the guards and gets the Firestone back for us so we can escape together. A good way of describing the Second Attack stages is to compare them to Zelda dungeons, except without the small keys. Unlocking doors is tied behind some kind of puzzle or switch, but oftentimes you're just required to defeat every enemy in the room. These puzzles never ramp up in complexity too heavily, except in some places where it's bullshit, and the bulk of the game revolves around combat. Pommy's controlled by a CPU and he'll occasionally help out by stunning enemies. You also have the option of plugging in a second controller to play as him. This is very important for speedrunners who want to get the world record in a category that nobody else cares for.
Speedrunning is the most degenerate act man has ever come up with.
I was taking a look at the Generation speedrun to see if it was possible to make that game any fun, but it looks like it's— What? You'll find bomb, fire, and speed power-ups drop randomly from defeated enemies and environmental blocks. More importantly, the kick, glove, and remote control upgrades are permanent for the length of the stage and always spawn in set locations. Alcatraz provides these upgrades in successive rooms to get players up to speed. The kick lets you keep a safe distance from your bombs and stuns enemies when you hit them. You can also freeze your bombs in place mid-kick, which will become very important later. The glove lets you carry and throw bombs, but the more important functionality comes in pumping them to create big bombs. These explode in a dome shape and continually deal damage to anything inside them, which makes defeating enemies much easier. As mentioned in Generation, the remote control lets you detonate bombs on command, which is arguably the most important upgrade in the series. That's the point where the game really gets going, but they disable it immediately for the stage boss. Every boss does this, and I have to say these Astral Knights are by far the weakest, most uninspired parts of this game. And I didn't notice this while playing the game, but they actually have a very James Bond inspired theme, like it's practically plagiarism. Oh, motherfuck. The game gets serious though. I mean, we literally kill this guy, and every other character will remind us that we literally killed a guy. It's got a darker tone to it than any other Bomberman game, but luckily the super cute chick Lilith shows up to lighten the mood. She says she's trying to collect the elemental stones to stop the leader of the Astral Knights. You know, just so happens we're trying to do the same thing. Yeah, well, spoilers, but no. Bomberman doesn't get the girl. She's gonna fuck the dog. After every boss, the music gets a remix and you typically have to perform some kind of backtracking, which isn't fundamentally a bad thing, but in this game there's never any new mechanics or secrets that make it enjoyable. It's the same stuff in reverse, done purely for the sake of padding out the playtime. To touch on the UI for a second, I don't think there's any justification for not having the kick and glove show up there at the top. It's either all of them or none of them, and I don't think it makes sense to have none. Sure, you could check on the pause screen, but that would just get annoying. As is, the hearts take up the majority of the UI. They could have been a segmented circle like Mario, but I understand the desire to match the shape of your health with the heart pickups, and so kids can make the connection that this stuff is your life. I think Generation does a great job solving this by making each full icon worth 4 smaller hearts. Shrinking the number of your hearts would make space for your run speed to be added, which is also weirdly missing. I guess they thought you could instantly tell where you stand in regards to speed, kicks, and gloves, but I don't buy it. Especially with speed where the increase feels more subtle. After that, the UI just needs some padding adjusted and it's good. Each stage culminates in a gravity generator room, which also disables your remote control. These rooms typically have tighter puzzles than the rest of the game that test your knowledge on new mechanics like throwing and kicking in this instance. The objective is to destroy the 4 pillars, producing a shield around the generator before you can go and tear it down. Poppy mentions that destroying the gravity generators on the rest of the planets might let us escape the black hole, so we steal a ship and head off. Oh no, wait. After every stage, there's a cutscene that gives some insight into the Astral Knights and their leader, Rukafelth. They spend this time on characterizing the enemies and expanding on the story, which... I mean, does anyone really care? The report says he wears a white suit of some kind, and uses bombs. Yeah, I don't know, that just sounds less like Bomberman and more like Bin Laden. Sorry, I just couldn't really stop thinking about this, but I wasn't even joking about the NTR thing before with Lilith. Like, that shit actually happens, and not with the fucking dog. What is with the Japanese's obsession of adding this shit into everything? It would have been totally fine if they didn't show that Bomberman was into her. I saw this post the other day on this topic that said, you see this shit everywhere, even in kids media, to which this guy responds with, name 2 examples. I'll be honest, I can't. But here's one! The stage select has some of the most solemn music I've heard in a game. There's also a shop that ruins any sense of isolation that was built up. The music's so out of place, and this guy doesn't even look like he was designed for the game, which is lame because you'll be coming here after every stage. It would have helped capture the mood better if there were unique vendors hidden within each stage that matched their aesthetic, and they could have sold different items to encourage exploration. At least split the multiplayer costumes between them so you wouldn't be punished too hard for missing one. The shop's important because it sells health upgrades which you can buy with the money you pick up in each stage. You can also buy full power. It's a consumable that starts you off in a stage with max power-ups and all the upgrades unlocked, including remote control. This alone might have been the reason why the shop had to be accessible from the stage select, but I would argue this item shouldn't even be in the game. Normally you don't retain anything between stages and have to start from scratch. Generation maintains your power-ups between stages, and it's bad because there's zero incentive to pick up anything or fight enemies after you max your stats in the first stage. I don't use full power in this playthrough because it does the game a disservice. It ruins the puzzle aspect of the stages and breaks the flow and pacing since you don't need to seek out the upgrades yourself. Anyway, you get the option to tackle each pair of stages in the order you want, so I go for Horizon first. Tommy actually follows up on his promise to redesign the ship earlier, which is pretty cute. He'll also typically evolve at the start of the second stage provided you picked up enough food. The type of food you collect takes him down a different evolutionary path, so you actually need to pay attention to what you pick up in a stage, not just to get your preferred evolution, but also since there are powered downs mixed in with the regular power-ups. I was having some trouble emulating this game because after a good while it would only respond to up and down movements on the stick. This is a known issue that seemingly nobody can trace the origin to. One user mentions it might be a form of anti-cheat implemented in the game before user Darth Sidious666 butts in, saying he played for a good hour and the bug refuses to appear. He then goes on to mark the issue as solved. What a fucking chud, am I right? In my experience, the glitch looks like it's triggered by specific screens, so he probably just left the game running on the pause menu. Fucking useless asshole. We make it to the gravity generator room, now armed with wind bombs from the stage's boss. We have to use them to push us up these slopes and cross gaps we wouldn't be able to otherwise. This room actually tripped me up a little the first time, but that's partly due to how zoomed in the camera is. It's a good challenge that takes us to the end of the stage. The next destination on our list is Aquanet. You'll notice that bomb elements each affect enemies in different ways, and your wind bombs won't damage most of them, so we still have to rely on fire to do the heavy lifting. Once we get ice bombs, we can obviously perform Alaskan pipelines, but they also freeze and do extra damage to some aquatic enemies. They explode in a round pattern, so I end up using them the most, even with the trade-off of being able to place one less bomb at a time compared to fire. Ice bombs are also used to solve some puzzles by freezing objects and creating walkable platforms over water and lava. Sadly, the gravity generator in this stage doesn't make much use of all this. We just use ice bombs to freeze these pillars and we're set. After another cutscene, we unlock two more planets, Starlight and Neverland. The music in the former is always the first to come to mind when I think of this game. There's an obvious spy theme going on in the OST, which is why that Siva Gunner track was made. I've glossed over the Astral Knights since they're practically the same every time, but the best strategy is just placing bombs and hoping they explode when they're near one. You also end up using ice bombs for every one of them since you can place multiple at a time and they explode in a circle, so I don't know what the fuck Mega Man shit is this guy on about. Definitely a downgrade from the more unique bosses of Bomberman 64. Lilith shows up for some extra lore after every boss and actually saves us from Mullock's last-ditch suicide attack. But during Zale's fight, she awakens her powers as the goddess Mihail, which in a Bomberman game is like, come on. But I actually think it's kinda cool that the game's sort of divergent from the rest of the franchise in that way. It somehow works even though the models are all doll-like and chibi. And speaking of chibi, he turned Chad. Lilith leaves to figure out what's happening to her and we get our new bombs. Collecting shiny gems is cool and all, but I had to wonder if you really needed so many elements to switch between. Lightning and earth bombs, well they're actually called Navarm bombs, are little more than glorified keys. Maybe a better solution would have been to use a system like Metroid where most items are a straight upgrade to your kit, with the option of turning them off if you ever need to. Then I thought, well obviously that would break any puzzles that require you to make use of multiple types at once, but nothing like that exists in the game. You can't actually switch your element until every bomb on the field's detonated, and I realize now that's the biggest missed opportunity of the second attack. As is, you can feasibly combine every bomb in the game except for 3 of them. Earth bombs would need to be tweaked because their explosion radius is fucked, and you can only place one at a time to compensate. So I think a better function for them would be to increase the radius on your big bombs. Wind bombs obviously need to deal no damage to you, and if your bombs weren't a danger to yourself past the second stage, it would really mess with not only the game's difficulty but the soul of the franchise itself, so that needs to be kept separate. The issue with gravity bombs is they erase everything that gets caught in them. Enemies, items, and even Bomberman. Plus they're balanced by the fact that you can only use one at a time. So really, you only need standard bombs with the ability to switch between wind and gravity. You could still use the C buttons like you already do, so if anything, it would result in less interfacing, unless you want to disable the other types in the pause screen. Now would this make the game easier, since you no longer have to switch between and figure out what enemies are weak to what type? Probably not. I can't think of a single instance where the effective element wasn't immediately obvious. The justification for why only wind and gravity are selectable with the C buttons might be a bit strange, but I'm sure they would have figured it out. Anyway, there's a lot of backtracking from here on, so we have some time to read out donations.
We've just received a generous $100 donation from a true Bomberman enthusiast. As a die-hard fan of Bomberman Funko Pops, I want to show my appreciation. Even my wife's boyfriend can't resist joining in the explosive fun. Let the bombs and collectibles unite us all.
The gravity generators in these stages require you to make use of multiple bomb types to complete them, which would be fun if it weren't for the bullshit you need to go through for these ice bridges. I don't know how they thought it was a good idea for the ice bombs to leave a hitbox after falling in lava, but it makes these sections require way more precision than they're worth. You need to time your kicks and freeze the bombs in place at the right moment, otherwise your platforms will be too far apart to cross. That alone isn't a problem, but the issue is that this freezing mechanic is never taught to the player. The How to Play movie, huh? Well, I'm a busy guy really, so I wasn't gonna sit through all that. Okay, it only took 2 minutes. This may be a cope, but the game fails to convey this mechanic in any meaningful way during gameplay. You could say this about the other upgrades, and to be fair, I have played other Bomberman games before, so I had some previous knowledge, but let's imagine I didn't. You'll know remote control does something when you see your bomb stop blowing up, and so naturally players will start pressing every button on their controller to figure out how to detonate them. There aren't many buttons, so of course when you get the glove, you'll start pressing them again to find out what it does, since you've now learned that some upgrades can require other inputs besides the A button. Once you figure out how to hold up a bomb, you'll also notice it growing bigger, and you'll naturally be taught about big bombs without any extra nudging from the game. Now it's pretty evident that the kick icon's a symbol of Bomberman's foot kicking a bomb, I think, so you'll naturally walk into your bombs at some point, and if not, then you'll see Balefail do it in the first fight, pushing you to think that's something you might be able to imitate. If you play around with buttons some more, you'll find that you can kick bombs without walking into them by simply pressing the A button again after dropping a bomb, and any reasonable player will come to the conclusion that they've achieved all there is to do with the upgrade. At least I did. Maybe I'm just special, but I somehow made it through here by sliding bombs across the walls with diagonal kicks, meaning freezing kicks isn't really required except for a single section in the final stage, at which point you'll have assumed you've learned all there is to know. I don't see why Pommy couldn't have mentioned it at some point, and the first instance of this mechanic being forced on you should have been a pool of water in Aquanet to make sure you understood how it worked before you got any further. And like I mean a big pool, not that sissy shit. And well, regardless, we made it past both planets. Oh, sorry, I just remembered, yeah, I need to do my dailies. Yeah, well, I'm feeling pretty lucky, so why don't we go for a pull or two? What the fuck? At this point we have... What? At this point we have multiple options. We can choose between either Epicure, Thanatos, or go straight to the warship and fight the final boss. So... Warship No is the best stage in the game, but there's some trial and error along with backtracking that'll really make you question what the fuck they were thinking. The objective is to blow up the engine rooms, which opens a door with deeper access to the ship. Instead of a mid-stage boss, we meet up with Lilith one last time before the end. She's struggling to hold back the goddess in her consciousness, but says we should go on without her. That's fine by Bomberman. Okay, it's really not that bad, but on a first time playthrough this part's overly frustrating and punishing. Keep in mind I still didn't know about freezing kicks at this point, so like my autism really flared up. The goal is to terminate the reactor on both the left and right bridge to open the door to Rukefelth. There's this really cool effect where the area dims as you shut off one side, and there's also a whole time sequence where you need to raise the lava and get across.
Oh god, I don't want to. Please,
that was close.
mommy.
What are you saying?
I want my money. I want my money very badly.
What are you doing, dude? You're so loud.
Me so horny. Me so horny.
So we walk into this whole thing. Rukefelth is betrayed by Balzeep, who gives us the last of his remaining power before he dies because, yeah, Rukefelth kills him. I'll give you the full rundown later, but we're pissed now because our new ally just died. This fight's the first in the game with a unique soundtrack, so you know shit's about to go down. Really? He starts spouting some chuny shit about his mortal form being too weak and that we actually fell right into his hands by bringing him his dumb fucking stones. It's the evil god, Sturtoth. Good luck, Bomberman? Tommy, this guy's like 5'9". Sturtoth's a fun fight. His hitbox is only out under certain conditions, so it's already a lot better than the Astral Knights will just take that shit. The attack cycles don't last too long, and it's rare that you're left with nothing to do but dodge. Now phase 2 is frankly not as good, but we take him down pretty handily with earth bombs. Uh-oh. Turns out we can't really beat him unless we have all 7 elemental stones. Well, that sucks. I guess we'll just leave with our new girlfriend. Sorry. I can't just leave Rukefelth here? Aw, fuck! Okay, let's get the good ending. The old guy at the shop actually has some secrets for sale, including Lilith's Awooga! What in the world? Oh, ho, 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 ho. Classic Japanese humor. Yeah, I'll be buying that. If you have a good eye, you'll have noticed a couple places and stages that you didn't have the means to access your first time through. Or if you're lazy, you'll just buy the hints from the shop. There's 4 Guardian armor pieces scattered across some stages that give permanent upgrades, and we can get 3 of them right now. They permanently grant us the kick, the glove, and massively reduces the time it takes for us to recover after being stunned. So this stuff just makes the inclusion of full power a lot stranger. Now we're prepared for what's coming up next. The following 2 stages introduce batteries and keycards which you need to unlock the entrance to the boss. This has the effect of making the stages a lot less linear than the previous ones, since the majority of the map is open from the very beginning. They're much better designed than the other stages in the sense that they give backtracking a purpose. Balzeep is the mid-stage boss of Thanatos, and he has a whole spiel about how he's been waiting for us since we last met on Planet Bomber. If you didn't know, Balzeep was actually Regulus from Bomberman 64, and he's been based facing the entire game after he heard Bomberman was the one fucking shit up. He was sort of a rival in the last game and teamed up with you to beat the final boss. This fight's a bit more unique than the others because he releases a black hole which follows you around, so you have to play a bit more safely. Oh fuck. Before we get to disfigure his shit, Mihail interrupts the fight and we get a huge lore dump. Yeah, no, I tuned out when she started talking about her boyfriend. Now we can make gravity bombs. Epicure's got a very unique vibe for the penultimate stage, so I figured the intended order was to go here first. Since you had to wait so long for a real opponent, I'll be sure to take my time with you. Now we have light bombs which can stop time on certain objects. This is only really useful for the gravity generator and one custom part in Thanatos. We can get the last Guardian armor piece and it grants us remote control permanently, which makes Warship Noah a cakewalk. When we get to Lilith, the cutscene actually plays out a bit differently. Mihail's had time to gain full control over Lilith's body and says we need to give her the elemental stone so she can reshape the universe. Yeah, that's for NT Army, bitch. This fight has one of the best tracks in the game, and it's really unexpected given how the remainder of Warship Noah is completely identical. It's a bit of a missed opportunity to not have a second version of the stage that makes more use of your gravity and light bombs. Even Cave Story did it, and that game was made by one man. Mihail runs away and the stage proceeds as normal. But before Sturtoth can transform to his second phase, Mihail shows up and they combine and... well, they're really just rubbing it in my face now. The Angel's by far the best part of this game. They're only vulnerable for a couple of seconds after every attack, so it's difficult to get damage in if you're relying solely on your reactions. Sturtoth showcased a bit of this, but the Angel goes all in on mimicking the abilities of our 7 elements. They'll flash the color they're about to use, starting with one attack at a time, then moving on to comboing you with multiple in succession. But guess what? It doesn't matter what bomb element you use in this fight. They all deal damage equally. Fuck. If anything, it's definitely a spectacle. And that's it. We beat the final boss. The angel promises to leave the universe alone for now, and Rukefeld and Lilith are turned back to normal. Except this time, I want you to come with me, Lilith? Yeah, it's like whatever, I guess. It sure sucks that so many people had to die for us to get to this point. Oh, never mind, they're all here to dick ride me to the end of the earth. Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Balzeeb goes back to calling himself Regulus and says we'll meet again, but we never do. Moving forward, Regulus is replaced by the complete non-character Max as Bomberman's rival. I really liked all these guys, especially after this ending sequence. It's a crime that these designs never came back in any capacity, and even Pommy gets relegated to just one of Bomberman's many pets in the future. So what was the point of showcasing multiple games in this video? I think it's hard to deny that Konami hasn't done the right thing with the Bomberman franchise. Focusing on multiplayer is definitely the way to go, which might sound strange given the extensive look I just gave the second attack. I did 100% the game, but even with that replay value, it takes like 9 hours to complete. As much as I like the second attack, it's mechanically very shallow, and same goes for any other Bomberman campaign. You'd really have to stretch the concept to its limits to get something that resonates with consumers, and seeing as that hasn't been done in 40 years, I think there's something to be said about it being fundamentally flawed. Now more than ever, there's incentive for developers to release multiplayer-only games. Despite R1's multiplayer being gimped by a shitty campaign, I honestly think it only sold well because attendees had nothing else to play during the Switch's launch. Bomberman R2 is going to have a story mode, but it seems like it's essentially the multiplayer components of the game wrapped in some cutscenes with CPUs. The multiplayer brings in the money in the audience, and that's where the mechanics can really shine. It doesn't translate to a single-player campaign, and what exists isn't enough to carry a game for more than a couple of hours. I recommend you play Generation for its multiplayer, but there is really no need for you to waste your time on the second attack. Bomberman 64 may have been more interesting given the shift in focus towards these crazy bomb jumps, a mechanic that really switches up the gameplay in a way that makes it interesting to tackle solo. But does this bouncing mechanic really need bombs? Let alone Bomberman? If you're familiar with the series, it's obvious, like, yeah, bomb jumps, but that's such a weird concept to attach to Bomberman. It seems like more of a tacked-on addition to the inherently uninteresting mechanics. I'm not saying the execution of bomb jumps was bad, but imagine the applications of stringing together placeable bounce pad in, say, a top-down Zelda game. Better a 3D one like Phantom Hourglass. There's so much more of a foundation to realize that concept, along with combat that's deeper than just blowing the fuck out of everything. Now why am I spending so much time talking about bomb jumps when that was only a mechanic in the original 64? That's because bomb jumping is in the second attack, but it was reduced to an entirely optional mechanic to collect a few custom parts. It's clear they wanted to make a puzzle-oriented game like a traditional Zelda, which is why they included the different bomb elements, but the inability to mix them severely limits the puzzles they could have made. Maybe it was a hardware issue, but the same limitation exists in Generation, so I doubt it. The reluctance to force bomb jumps into the main campaign makes sense after 64, but I think it just needed a little more easing into. This is all to say that single-player Bomberman doesn't and has never worked well. Maybe a bold statement, but that's how I feel. The best the campaigns had ever been was in Saturn Bomberman, and that game takes like 2 hours to complete. I'm not saying short games are bad, but it's worrying to see a concept being squeezed for all it's worth in just 2 hours. Imagine stretching that out for 40 years. I ended up really wanting to know why Hudson kept leaning into single-player titles even after they discovered the multiplayer formula. I wish there was any information about the development of this game, because that would open the door to so much discussion, but all I can do for now is assume. If you really want more classic Hudson multiplayer, others have stepped in to fill the hole. Like this fan game called Power Bomberman looks amazing. It's based on assets from Saturn Bomberman, it even has dodge battle, so I'm definitely gonna give it a try. And if you're feeling a little more adventurous, there's lots of other Bomberman clones that might pique your interest.
So what happens when you mix the old school Bomberman with Fortnite Battle Royale? Wait, no, that guy lagged out. I thought I killed Israel. That'd have been bad. Don't kill Israel.
I don't think I'm really willing to give this one a shot.